Hi, this is Michael Buffer, and welcome to the BoxHard Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Mikey Garcia.
This the monster from the swamps, Regis Rougarou Program.
Hey, what's up? This is King Carlos Molina, former IBF world champ.
This is Michael, the Bounty Hunter, 2012 Olympian and your people's champ.
This is Charlie Edwards, flyweight champion of the world.
This is Fast Eddie Chambers, and you're listening to the BoxHard Podcast with my main man, Joey Coastman.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 248 of the BoxHard Podcast. I'm your host Joey Coastman. My main man is back. It is of course the last voice you hear actually before I start speaking every single week. It's the last voice on the podcast. It is of course the former heavyweight world title challenger Mr. Eddie Chambers. Eddie, how are you my friend?
I'm good, my man. How are you?
Very good. Like I say, if you're not here with me doing the show, you're on the intro every week anyway. Always great to hear your voice. Let's dive straight into the review part of the show. I'm going to fly through this. I didn't really watch, too much action really over the course of the week kind of thing. I know the results. I watched little bits here and there, but I'm not going to go deep on the analysis type angle. Last Thursday, at the Bubble in the MGM Grand Las Vegas, heavyweight Jerry Forrest, obviously, a guy that was supposed to be boxing Big Baby Miller. Then Big Baby Miller fouled another ped test, of course. So in stepped late replacement Carlos Takam, 38-5 with a draw. Jerry Forrest, 26-3. I think he has losses to Gerald Washington, Michael Hunter, and someone else. Anyway, Jerry Forrest, should have took advantage of the opportunity. Carlos Takam, quite a big name, especially in Europe. Jerry Forrest, I don't know if you saw it. I know you didn't see it, Eddie, but they went backstage and Jerry Forrest was having his, like when they go backstage, like with a camera to show you what the fighters are doing before the main event starts, and usually they're getting their hands wrapped. Jerry Forrest backstage was tucking into a roast beef sandwich, which I've never seen anyone do that before, and it was quite bizarre because he came out to the ring. He didn't really do much, to be honest with you, in the early rounds, and in the late rounds he did even less, if you can believe that. And the trainer of Carlos Takam actually was shouting, "Hit him in the roast beef," which was quite funny. But yeah, I've never seen that. So Jerry Forrest, a real shame there. Hasim Rahman, I'll tell a little story. Hasim Rahman Jr., I was speaking to him and he was saying, put your money on Jerry Forrest. And I called him and I said, hey, how much money should I put on Jerry Forrest? I don't really know much about him. I know that Carlos Takam's a tough guy. Rahman Jr. has sparred numerous rounds with Carlos Takam, so he knows him. And he said, yeah, Forrest, In the end, I'm not quite sure how it happened, but we were speaking, and in the end, he ended up putting a bet on, but I didn't, which is weird. But he couldn't get to the casino in time or whatever, so he transferred me the money to put the bet on for him. And he put, I'm not going to go into how much, but he put quite a big bet on, and he backed Jerry Forrest, and of course it didn't happen. He barely won a round. It was a unanimous decision in favour of Carlos Takam, so I felt bad for Hasim Rahman Jr. more than I felt for Jerry Forrest, really, because he was pretty terrible. Also on the bill, Carlos Castro moved to 26-0, a win for him against Cesar Juarez, who's now 25-9. Juarez was pulled out on his stall after 4 rounds. There was a good fight between the two undefeated fighters. Joshua Fat Ortiz, now 8-0. He was able to beat Joshua Orta in a close fight. It was a majority decision over 6 for Ortiz. I think Orta only had a few days' notice, so I want to see him get another opportunity again. That's it for Thursday. Just having a little look. On the Friday, of course, boxing returned for the first time in the UK since this whole lockdown thing. Frank Warren was the first promoter to bring boxing back. On this bill here, we got to see heavyweight David Adeleye move to 2-0. A win for him, like I say, TKO in 2 rounds against Matt Gordon. We also got to see Hamza Shiraz move to 11-0. He was able to get a stoppage win, actually. His opponent, Paul Keane, who was 12-1, now 12-2, retired on his store after 7 rounds. That one was for Shiraz's WBO European Super Welterweight title. Paul Keane was actually down in the first round. I actually thought that one would go the distance. I had a bet on for that to go to the scorecards, and also the main event, which did. So I was a bit annoyed there when Paul Keane's corner pulled him out. I mean, he was just losing every round, really. They thought they'd save him for another day kind of thing. And the main event, Brad Foster now 13-0 with 2 draws. It was a unanimous decision win for him over 12 rounds against the undefeated 12-0 James Beach Jr. That one was for the Commonwealth and British Super Bantamweight titles. Beach was cut above the left eye in the 4th round, and Foster was cut above the left eye in the 8th round. All in all, good to see boxing back, but I don't know, man. I don't know. I didn't really enjoy the fights, to be honest. That's me being brutally honest. I'm just pleased that boxing's back, though. That's it for that one there. Moving out now to just having a little look for Saturday. Did anything happen on Saturday of note? I think there was supposed to be a fight somewhere in Mississippi. Not quite sure if that took place now. Nothing took place on the Sunday. And of course Tuesday, that's where we're going to finish up. Tuesday the 14th of July, 2 days ago now. Back at the bubble in the MGM Grand, Las Vegas, Nevada. It was supposed to be a bill topped by Jamel Herring. He was supposed to be defending his world title against Jonathan Oquendo, I believe his name was. But Jamel Herring, once again, for the second time, test positive for coronavirus. So he was pulled off, and he was very frustrated because I think he was trying to say he didn't have it, and I'm not quite sure. It was quite technical. I spoke to him just briefly. I said, it's very confusing, and he said, yeah, it is very confusing, but you know, he's a positive guy. He's going to dust himself down and you know, come back. I think he wants to box in August, something like that. He still wants that Carl Frampton fight later on in the year. But without his fight topping the bill, the co-main event got elevated to the top of the bill. Michaela Meyer, she's now 13-0, a complete shutout win for her over 10 rounds against Helen Joseph, who's now 17-5 with 2 draws. Also on the bill, a guy by the name of Clay Collard. He's now 8-2 with 3 draws. He was able to beat a guy called Laurent Nelson, I think. Nelson was down in the first round and twice in the second round, where the TKO came for a guy that, like I said, they call Cassius Clay Collard. He's a white guy. I think twice now he's boxed in the bubble at the MGM Grand, and the first one he was able to pull off an upset against an undefeated fighter. So a lot of people, you know, getting behind him. He's a bit of a cult hero, if you like. Yeah, at the bubble. Moving on to the preview part of the show. Later tonight we get to see at the bubble once again Felix Verdejo, 26-1, take on Will Madeira, who's 15-0 with 3 draws. Heavyweight Jared Anderson, 4-0. The fighter out of Toledo, young heavyweight, 6'4". He's only 20 years of age. He also has the nickname Big Baby, 4-0, 4 KOs. He takes on Hector Perez, who's 7-2. That's it. That's it for that one. And is there anything on Saturday? I think there's. I'm sure there's a heavyweight fight in Germany on Saturday for the vacant WBA Continental Heavyweight title. Ajit Kabayel, 19-0, former European champion, holds a win, of course, over Derric Chisora. He takes on a guy called Evgenios Lazaridis, who is a Greek fighter, 32 years of age, 2 losses, 1 to Erkan Tepe on points, 1 to a guy called Samuel Kadji, who I've never heard of, to be honest with you. Yeah, anyway, he's back. Also, there is a fight card, of course, that takes place on the Tuesday. I don't think I'm missing anything on the Sunday or Monday. Back at the bubble In the MGM Grand, former world champion Oscar Valdez, 27-0. He's in a 10-rounder against Jason Velez, who's 29-6 with a draw. Velez, if nothing else, is a very tough guy and he can really punch. So that could be quite interesting. I'm looking forward to that fight there. And also on the undercard, Edgar Berlanga, who's 13-0 with 13 KOs. He takes on Eric Moon, who's 11-2, and that one is over 8 rounds. That's really it, though, for the preview part of the show. Just going to quickly fly through some news here, Eddie, before I bring you in for your Lockdown Knockdown segment. So the good news is that we get to see the Katie Taylor against Delphine Persoon rematch. Of course, it was on the undercard of Joshua Ruiz 1 in New York. But a lot of people on the night felt like Persoon actually deserved to win. I was one of those people, and it was quite annoying really, because I thought she won quite clearly, but she didn't get it on the cards, and she went away and tried to do something. I can't remember what she tried to do. She had an amateur fight. I want to say she tried to qualify for I think it was Olympic qualifiers, even though she's a professional fighter, a former world champion. She was undefeated before that fight against Taylor. She perhaps still should be undefeated, if I'm not mistaken. She may have one loss, actually, can't remember. And yeah, I think she tried to qualify for the 2020 Olympics, and she got beat over 3 rounds by someone who, I'd never heard of. And, she's also a full-time policewoman in Belgium. And anyway, the fight's back on. I'm not quite sure how good Persoon is going to be. I don't know how much time she's really got to prepare. It's about a month or something like that. It's a big fight, obviously, and I guess during this lockdown thing, she's probably been real busy with her police job in Belgium, and again, losing over 3 rounds to an amateur, I don't know. It's just been a bit hit and miss since that first fight took place. But again, I'm not hating. I want to see, a rightful winner. Hopefully we get to see that in the second match. Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce will be having fights themselves, fights against other guys in the meantime before they get it on. Joe Joyce will be taking on Michael Wallish. That one's supposed to take place on Saturday, the 25th of July. Michael Wallish is a guy who, if I'm not mistaken, has been in there with, I want to say, Christian Hammer, and that's completely off the top of my head. I think he was undefeated and he lost to Christian Hammer. I think he lost his O to him, if I'm not mistaken. He also boxed and lost to Efia Jagba and then Tony Yoka. So he's making his way around the Olympians. Should be a relatively straightforward win there for Joe Joyce. Lyndon Arthur takes on Dex Spellman. That's going to be a good fight there. Another Frank Warren card. July 31st on a Friday, that one. Archie Sharp as well, good friend of mine. He takes on Jeff Afori. That one's going to be August the 20th. Archie Sharp, I don't know. Oh yeah, it is a defense of his WBO European Super-Featherweight title. Jeff Afori, a guy that has beaten a few prospects when he's had pretty much no notice. He's found out he's boxing an undefeated prospect on fight week, and then he steps in and he's got the job done on a couple of occasions. So he's a dangerous guy with no notice, and he's got plenty of notice for this one. Like I say, it takes place on August 20th, and I'm pleased for Archie as well to be topping a bill. And then, of course, Daniel Dubois returns on August 29th against Eric Pfeiffer, who has a record of 7-0. I think he had quite a few fights in the World Series of Boxing. He's got quite an extensive amateur career. He beat Tony Yoka at least twice in the amateurs, if I'm not mistaken. So that's big there. So that could be quite interesting. But like I say, I've just mentioned all the main events. All of these cards have got good undercards as well. So check all of them out. Liam Williams has signed a long-term deal with Frank Warren, so he's staying there for the foreseeable future, as is the undefeated Jack Catterall. It seems like he's been waiting forever for a world title shot, still undefeated. Not even sure I think he's 25-0 now. Friend of the show, Jack Catter. All the best to him. And Matchroom have announced as well their fight card that they're going to be putting on August 15th when Julio Cesar Martinez tops the bill when he takes on Williams Arroyo. That one's actually going to be in the streets of Tulsa. So that's going to be interesting. They're closing down an area pretty much, and they're going to put a ring in the middle of the street on a Saturday night, August 15th in Oklahoma, live on DAZN in the US. So that'll be interesting. I think that's it for the news. Let me just double check, Eddie. Yes, one other thing. Shakur Stevenson has vacated his WBO featherweight world title, and he's being installed as the number one contender at 130. The sad thing is that he's going to be the number one contender for Jamel Herring's world title. So I don't want to see that fight. That's a tough fight for Herring. I want to see Herring remain champion for a long time. But guys like Archie Sharp will be quite annoyed because that's another guy in the way of him getting his title shot and stuff like that. But yeah, that's it though for the news. Sorry that took so long, Eddie. Quite longer than I expected, but let's get into it. The Lockdown Knockdown, I think it's the fourth time we've done this. Last time we spoke about, what can happen if you overtrain for big fights. We also spoke about your early fights against the likes of Robert Hawkins for the Philadelphia state title, and then after that, the Andrew Greeley fight and the Ed Mahone fight, the guy with a crazy record. He knocked everyone out in all of his wins, and he boxed some big names. What will we be discussing this week?
We just want to pick it up not too far after that. This is where it starts to get more interesting. I mean, I guess the other ones are, those fights are kind of interesting. And, there was some learning, with it. But now we're talking about, I think, directly after Ed Mahone, if I'm not mistaken, was Domonic Jenkins. Was that, am I correct? Yeah, see, Domonic Jenkins was, this is how it is. Like, Domonic Jenkins basically was my audition, if you want to say, so to speak, for Goossen Tudor, because we had talked with those guys, and they were saying, well, let me get a look at it. You know what I mean? Because they really didn't know much about me. They saw my record. They said, oh, the record's good and everything. Got some decent names on there. A couple guys past the prime. You know how the thing is. But we need to see what he really can do in front of a real guy. So they told us, well, we got to fight for you. Obviously at this stage in your career, you shouldn't be looking for no soft touches anyway. But, for us to really invest in you, and at that point, it was like, you win this fight, you get the bonus, you get the sign, you get everything. You know what I mean? We're going to ride with you for as long as for the foreseeable future. So here's what they say okay, well, we got a real guy for you. His name is Domonic Jenkins. He's a real spoiler. Don't look and think just because his record was, at the time, I think it was 9-5. Don't look at that record and think that it's, he's a 9-5 guy. My record, I think at the time was 22 or something like that, and or some, maybe not that many, or something like that.
26-0 at the time. Was this your first TV fight, Eddie?
No, actually, this Domonic Jenkins fight was actually not televised. Oh. It was on the Paul Williams, Sharmba Mitchell undercard, and it was a non-title. I mean, of course, a non-title for me, but it was a non-televised fight. Wow. But it was a very, very interesting fight because of all the guys I've fought, I think this is one of the few times the guy weighed. I think we weighed exactly the same weight. I think we were both 214, but he was just 6'4". And they say, oh, he's a decent puncher. He's knocked off a few undefeated guys. He's done this. He's done that. So don't go in there taking this guy lightly. And actually, for camp, I remember once again I was starting to move into the direction of like training too hard, because now you're thinking, oh, I got this big thing with, Goossen Tudor, these Dan Goossen, this is the real deal. This is the big time, man. I got to be right. So I remember I was sparring with different guys in camp, and one of the smart partners I had, which I don't want to say smart partner, like he was just helping me, but is by the name of Steve Cunningham, former world champion, cruiserweight world champion, and top title contender at heavyweight. we were sparring, and I remember like I wasn't eating right. And what I mean by not eating right is I wasn't eating enough food. I was trying to get myself down to a certain weight. I was trying to be perfect. And I was once again doing too much. And I remember sparring with Steve, and I got hit with a little body shot. And I remember it was like, man, and it just wouldn't stop hurting for a while. And I'm getting nervous, man. I'm like, man, I can't have these things going on before a fight like that. And then I remember after the sparring session one time, I looked completely depleted. Eyes were bloodshot red. Face looked completely like moisturized. I mean, not moisturized. Moisture like depleted, deficient. It was just like I looked done. You know what I'm saying? And he looked at me, and I remember he was like, "Man, you all right?" And I'm like, "I'm good. I just feel a little tired." And I was just wearing myself down again. And then once again, I had to go home, rethink what I was doing. All this ridiculous training, all this extra stuff that I was trying to do was really unnecessary. Now, granted, the guy I was fighting and the opportunity was huge, but I didn't want to overdo things and feel like I felt before. So I kind of downshifted a little bit. Plus, I heard we were going to be fighting in Reno, Nevada. And, I don't know if you know, Joe, but in Reno, Nevada, it's high altitude. So now I'm thinking, oh, man, I got to get out there and deal with this altitude. I don't want to get tired. So, all of these things are playing in my mind. And once again, me and my brother talk a lot, and Steve, me and my brother Steve, and we once again went to, man, stop worrying about these dudes, man. Like, we're going out here to fight and we're going out here to beat this guy, but don't put all this pressure on yourself. You don't really, these dudes ain't never fought anybody like you. So don't worry about them. Let them worry about you. So we talked about it, went over some stuff, and calmed down a little bit and just let things happen. You know what I mean? It was, of course my dad was there too. So, he's, my dad's all high strung. He ain't got that kind of talk. He's like, I don't, he would say something like, oh, hell with that, boy. Just fight and just do, you know what I mean? Steve, we would sit down, we would talk, we would kind of come up with things and kind of, relax and just let things happen like they should. You know what I mean? So we got out to Reno, and we're, first thing we wanted to do when we get out to Reno, because me and now, I'm always with Steve. Like, Steve's my right-hand guy, all the time. And even to this day, he's like that. No disrespect to you, Joe. You my man too. But I'm just saying, my right-hand guy. You know what I mean? Like, Ant now is there too. I got a few real close guys to me, but Steve has always been that, that family. So we would go out like, yo, this high altitude, this is that, blah, blah, blah. He didn't have a fight coming up. So he's like, yo, let's just go out and run, see how it feels when we go out and run. And like I said, I had trained hard, but I kind of downshifted a little bit with unnecessary training. And I remember going out there and they're talking about how crazy the altitude is and all that. So we got out there and I'm like, I start running. And you feel the little burn, you know what I mean? There's a little burn that comes to you, feel in your chest and in your lungs a little bit. But I felt great, actually, up there. Like, I was like, man, I feel better than I did when I was, on regular altitude. So maybe this is better for me. And I remember running, and I remember we went to the gym. And the funny thing is, we were in the gym. This is a little side note thing here. Was Paul Williams was there. And you remember how they always said Paul Williams is only 6'1.5"? That's the biggest lie I've ever heard in my life. Paul Williams got to be either 6'3", maybe 6'4". There's no doubt about it in my mind. I was standing next to Paul Williams. First of all, he's towering over me. He was almost the exact same height as my manager's son, who was 6'3.5". Almost 6'4". He was standing also next to James Brown in the picture we had later, and they was trying to say he's damn near the same height as James Brown, and everybody knows James Brown's almost 6'5". So I don't understand why people kept saying he was like only 6'1" or whatever. I don't know if that was him and trying to make himself seem shorter so that other people wouldn't worry as much, or I don't know, or be surprised when they see him at the weigh-in. But the man is tall. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But we saw him in the gym. And him and another guy he brought with him, and this was literally maybe a day or two before the fight, was getting in the ring sparring. And I'm thinking, oh, they just probably gonna touch it. No, they were going in and they were sparring. I mean, like throwing real shots. And I'm like, yo, don't this dude got a fight in like 2 days? Like, why is he in here sparring? Like, you can get a cut, anything can happen. You can get knocked out, break your hand. You don't never take a chance like that within 2 weeks. But these guys had their own way. They coming from a different part of the country we don't know. And I'm like, wow. And I was shocked. But anyway, But we're in there training and we're doing all these things, and I'm just starting to feel really good about everything. So fast forward to the fight night. So I go into the dressing room, and I'm feeling okay. Everything's fine. You know what I mean? I'm a little nervous thinking about the fight, and I got a couple things in my head now, and I'm feeling a little more relaxed, but I'm still a little nervous. Then I go to start warming up, and this issue I've had with my rib kind of like showed up a little bit, and it made me real nervous, man, because it started to really hurt, like I had a bruise or something. Like at first I started to move around, and I had to take a deep breath because I had made a move, and I felt the rib kind of like lock up or something, and I'm like, oh, what the hell am I going to do? I can't tell these guys my ribs are messed up, and I'm like, now I'm starting to sweat bullets, and I'm like, what am I going to do? And as I started to warm up, and I just started trying to ignore the pain and let the adrenaline pump and things like that, after a while I started to warm up, the blood started to flow, it was gone. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like, all right, at least I don't got to worry about that. I just got to worry about the guys. Just go out here and fight. And for some reason, as soon as that kind of relaxed and I started to feel a little better, I started to feel a great deal of confidence. For some reason, it just all of a sudden out of nowhere, boom, I just had this surge of confidence. Like I had even a plan in my mind of what I was going to do, because I saw the guy at the weigh-in. I kind of knew what to expect a little bit by looking at him and on the press conference. And I'm like, he seems like a strong guy. And from what they're telling me, he's obviously tough and blah, blah, blah. But I think I got something for him, So I go out there, and the first thing that I was thinking, and I don't know why, but I think, I don't know if I can't remember when that fight happened, but I remember Floyd Mayweather using the jab to the body, real effective, like this fight with Diego Corrales. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, I like that. With a guy as tall as him, and the fact that he's similar in weight or almost the same weight as me, I feel like I can really do something off of that and use that. And that's one of the first things I did. I used the jab to the head, I used the jab to the body, and really had him in a weird spot. He didn't know what to expect. Obviously, I mean, he probably saw a couple of videos that I had or whatever. Probably saw something, but he really didn't know what to expect. And he's one of those guys that probably just say, "I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna fight whoever I fight. They're obviously not bringing me in to win, so I'm just gonna go out here and spoil it." He probably wasn't even paying attention or thinking about me or worried about what I was gonna do. He was just coming in there to knock me out. But anyway, so I start with the jab to the body, and an offsetting jab up to the head to the body. I remember starting to bring the hook into it a little bit. And initially I was like kind of, keeping him at bay and just keeping him, behind my jab before I really threw any big shots. But the hook got in a little bit. I would land it here and there. And I remember just being super accurate, and it felt really, really good. And I'm not sure what round it was. What round did I stop him in, Joe? I can't really remember. I think it might have been a third.
Fifth, I believe.
It was the fifth, okay. And I can't remember what round it was in. I think it might have been the round right before I stopped him. I caught him with a really, really nice right hand. And it was because I had been setting him up through the course of the fight off the jab, with both the jab to the head and to the body and everything, and mixing in the hook and even right hands to the body and different things like that. And I caught him with a really nice right hand, and all of a sudden, boom! I looked up and he was gone. I was like, "Yo, what the hell?" And it was like a split second, like you snap at the. It seems like in the ring, it's like when you're in there and something happens, it's almost like an hour. It's like not an hour, but it's almost like. It was like a whole minute went by. You know what I mean? That I couldn't find where this guy was. It's literally that slow. Things start to slow down. I hit him with that right hand, and he was gone. I thought that he fucking get out the ring or something. I didn't know where he went. I looked down, and I'm like, oh, snap. He's literally bent all the way down, like if you're doing a squat with with the bar on your back, and you squat with your ass touching the ground, basically. They call it ass to the ground. He went all the way down. Like, I don't know how this guy went that low without hitting the ground. And then all of a sudden, the only reason why I really knew where he went was he grabbed my legs, and I looked down like, oh, so he grabbed my legs to, keep from going down and to stay up. And I remember like firing a few more shots. I can't remember exactly what point in the round it was, but he ended up making it through to the end of the round. And I think it was the round before I stopped him. And after that, if I can't remember for sure, but I remember because there were commentators. It was like, I don't know if it was like like a small time, like how do you put it? It's like we had this thing called 15rounds.com. It was like an internet thing they would do where they were filming the fights, but it wasn't like televised. You know what I'm saying? It was just basically within, I don't know, like a internet TV type thing. Mm-hmm. Well, that might have been what they had because that's what was going on. I remember watching the video of it, and they were actually saying I started to step it up. Like I started to follow up off the jab because for the first 3 or 4 rounds, I had kind of just boxed them. You know what I mean? Using the jab, head, body, and all, and really was really picking my shots, being active, but picking my shots before I would, decide to land some big stuff. But anyway, in this round, I had started to step it up because I felt like I had him. You know what I mean? The round before, I just almost dropped him, and he was kind of, weakening. You could see him kind of get, almost losing faith. You know what I mean? And realizing that it just wasn't going to be his night with this guy. So I think I followed up hitting with a couple big shots, and he kind of stumbled back, and I hit him a couple more, and I think he buckled again. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the ref just saw where it was going, jumped in and stopped the fight. And I remember the crowd at the end of it booing hard. Like they were just they were so mad. And I was like, damn, even when they announced me as the winner, I'm like, damn, y'all hated the fight that much? And the guy was like, nah, they not booing you. They booing the ref because they wanted to see you just basically take him out. And they felt like it stopped it a little early. So I was like, all right, at least they're not booing me. And they were kind of, there was a lot of people. I remember after the fight, they came up to me. And one that I really remember was Max Kellerman. And he was like, man, you're a special guy, man. You're really a special fighter. He's like, man, if you ever think about really, dropping to cruiser. And I was like, man, I thought about it, man. I tried to get my guys to, do that because I really felt like I have a real good shot at winning the title there. He's like, man, shit, look. And he said it to me like, you know how guys talk when they talking amongst themselves and not no cameras around. He's like, man, shit, man, you go down the cruiser, man, you'll have 20 fucking defenses. There's nobody down there can mess with you. Nobody. And he's like, please, if you do anything, think about dropping to cruiser. And I'm like, wow. You know what I mean? Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Mac Kellerman at the time, he was still on the rise a little bit, but he was still well known, you know what I mean, through ESPN and all. But I was like, wow, hearing a guy say like that, say stuff about, about me and say, that my boxing ability was so great that guys, I don't know if David Hay was around at that point yet, but to say that guys, any of the guys that were there was not able to stand up to me. It was a pretty good thing to hear for a kid like me who really was kind of lacking confidence sometimes and not really thinking the greatest things about himself. So it's good when you hear a guy like that say something like that and really respect you, especially from your peers, guys who were in the sport with you, maybe not fighting, but an analyst like that. You know what I'm saying? It was really nice to hear.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, they were booing the referee. The referee that night, Jay Nady. We were talking about height. How tall is Jay Nady? He always looks like a giant in the ring.
He was a legitimate 6'4.5", 6'5", definitely, maybe more. I don't know. I know he was eye to eye or higher to Domonic Jenkins. And Domonic Jenkins is a legitimate 6'4", because I've had him in camp with me after that fight, so I know he's a tall kid, Domonic Jenkins. But anyway, Jay Nady's definitely a tall guy.
Yeah, he's obviously still going. He's been at the bubble in the MGM Grand, even refereeing during the pandemic. He's actually refereed 976 fights, which is crazy. He's got to have probably refereed, I want to say, I can't think of any other referees that have probably refereed that many fights still going. I mean, he's still going. He's 72 years of age now. A heap of experience.
Jeez, he's 72?
Yeah, man.
Damn, I got to see him. I ain't seen him in a little while. Does he even look that? Because I don't remember him looking that old, man. 72.
Nah,
damn.
He looks good for his age, I think.
Yeah, but well, there you go. You know what I mean? But that was think about where I am now. I'm 38 now. And that fight, I had to be, 24? 24 maybe? 25? dang, that's a that's a good amount of time, man. You know, it was about 13, 14, 13, 12, 13 years ago, man. That's good. He's still around.
Yeah, it's good that he's still around, still on top of his game. Good referee, I think, Jay Nady.
And we're going to go from there because we're going, at that point, what happened was, I remember going back to the office, and it was a funny little side story that when I came out there to actually sign with them, my dad's always looking for me to get some kind of sparring or to do something. And one of my favorites of all time, everybody knows James Toney, was in the gym, and he was, training or whatever. And so my dad was like, yeah, we want to come in the gym, man. We want to spar with James. And I'm sitting there like, I didn't say I wanted to spar with James. And James got word or whatever. It was say, yeah, man, bring him down here. I'll spar with the young fella. Like, he's like, man, tell him I don't turn nothing down but my collar. I was like, yeah, this guy. I was like, I would love to meet him at that stage. It would have been awesome to meet him. Like, it would have been a great experience to spar, but it also just meeting him, you know what I mean? Because the comedic relief that this guy, he's a funny guy. But anyway, that's a little side note. But anyway,
so
after that,
the sparring never happened.
He never got a chance to spar. The only time that he was in the gym with me at the same time was when he came down and I was getting ready for Sam Peter later on. And he came in and was telling me about, because he had fought Sam at that point twice. And he was telling me about, man, you know how you could beat this guy. I know Eddie James. You got skill. You better kick this boy ass. You know how James talk. So, but it was cool to see him then too. You know what I mean? I didn't get a chance to see him before, but he's always been one of my favorites, and actually my actual favorite now. But to have watched anyway. But yeah, we went back to the camp, not camp, to the office of Goossen, which is down in Cali. We flew down because we were going to sign and everything, and we were going to review the tape. And he kind of had like a little signing party, if you will. Had a few of the press people come up and to review the tape, look at the new guy that they got, and blah blah blah. And everybody was so like amazed, and they were like, "Man, people don't beat this guy like you beat him. Like, you really got a real future." Like, it was like a brag thing, not brag, but it was like, everybody patting me on my back type situation. At that point, I've never really experienced anything like that. You know what I mean? Like, I've never been to something later on in my career that we're going to talk about at a later date happened. Something like that happened too when I was getting ready to fight Vladimir. But to have something like that for, like I said, a kid like me coming from where I come from, having these people who, writing for big papers and, big time athletes and, just different people. And it's like, man, to really respect and, give me that kind of respect and that kind of, admiration at that point, I was like, wow, that's awesome. It was like, I still up to this, still today, it's still just thinking back on it. It's like, man, that's great. So, I did it, I signed, and it's funny, I got pictures from the signing. And then at that point, we were trying to figure out a fight. We were looking to go immediately, because I think at that point I was ranked 15 or maybe even a little higher in the IBF. So we were looking to go at maybe getting a continental belt as soon as possible. And there was an opportunity that after I signed, where maybe I get a fight with this guy, and I think it was February. I want to say, was it February 10th again? When I fought
February 9th.
February 9th, right. February 9th, I fought Derric Rossy. So they were setting up, like, we got an opportunity, we may have an opportunity with for the USBA title, fight this kid Derric Rossy. And I remember hearing about him fighting on one of my cards when I was at the Blue. And I was like, oh, okay, and they said, and I remember Steve like, oh man, I saw him fight. He is green as he is as square as a pool table. He's twice as green. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm thinking, but no matter what people say, and even though I believe what my brother was saying, no doubt about it. But you still got your thoughts in your head, and you're still going to be nervous no matter what. And then remember, this is my first fight as a Goossen Tudor fighter. I ain't trying to go in there and like make these dudes regret their investment. You know what I mean? So, but of course. And what's funny? Chris Arreola was on my undercard. He fought. I can't remember who he fought. It's funny enough. The guy that he fought was in the. I don't know this. I wasn't there. I wasn't down there, but people were coming back and telling me that his opponent was in the. The where was it? I don't know if it was the hallway at a hotel or the lobby, eating pizza at 12:30 at 1 o'clock at night, 2 days before the fight. I was like, man, we all know where he's going to be going, where he's going to be. He's going to have to carry this dude out in the bag after Chris get done with him. Because I saw Chris Arreola a couple of times fight before that, and we were under the same umbrella basically with Duke Goossen Tudor. So I had an opportunity to see him fight a few times, and even on at different points. So I knew what was going to happen. You know what I mean? But anyway.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. He Zakeem Graham was his name. He got stopped in 3 rounds and never boxed again. Yeah,
basically. And we knew that was going to happen. And I remember the guy coming up and telling me, I remember Lenny, my man Lenny, was like, man, this dude going to get killed in there, man. I don't know why this dude doing what he's doing. He out here eating pizza and drinking beer and all. I don't even know if it was beer. It might have been soda. But it's like, yo, these dudes, they know where they're coming for. They're coming. It's like lambs to the slaughter. They just know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? But anyway, so, and all these things are happening. And I don't know how it happened. I ended up coming up with a freaking bug, man. I had the flu. I got the damn flu, and I was trying so hard to act like I was cool, trying not to sniffle around the guys. I was like not around Derric, because I remember me and Derric Rossy had to do the stare down and all of that. And he was a nice enough guy and everything, respectful, cool, you know. But I remember I was like trying to hold back stuff, keep, you know, because I was like, you know, coughing up the phlegm and all of that crap, not to be graphic, but, and I'm sitting there like, oh man, not another damn issue. Like, what is going on? Every single time you fight is going to be something. And I remember talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Bowie Fisher. God rest his soul. One of the great trainers was with Bernard for so many years. He used to always say, man, never 100%. There's always something. And if you're a real fighter, you fight through it. You ain't got no excuses. Just get in there and fight no matter what. Don't say nothing about it. Just handle business. And I was like, damn. So those types of things that you say to kids and you say to young fighters and you say to young people in general, that from guys you respect, you really look at that and you really listen and you start to epitomize. You want to epitomize what they're saying and what they look for in a real athlete, a real man. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm like, I know I can't go to my dad for sympathy because he would have said the same damn thing. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna have to deal with it. And I'm talking about like hard to sleep, like, you know, somewhat like these cold, weird sweats and then stuff at night. And I'm like, oh man, trying to get as much rest as I can, trying to do the fluids, you know. And I remember it was, and the craziest thing is, if it wasn't enough that I was sick, now we're fighting in Suffolk County. He went to Boston College. I think it was a community college gym that we fought in. That was, I think, one of the maybe I don't know if it was a junior college. I know it was a community college that he had went to or had frequently been at or something. And because he played football for Boston College, and I know he used to be at this school. But anyway, it was basically in his damn backyard. So when you come out, now forget me being sick, but when you come out, just to hear the crowd, first of all, he booing the hell out of me. And they're Derric Rossy, you know, and getting the clap going. It was almost like a soccer match. You know what I mean? Over in the UK. And I know you know what that's like, Joey. So it's like, man, I'm sitting there listening to this crap. But I'm like, man, look, I'm sick. You know, if it's going to go bad, it's going to go bad. So I'm playing to the crowd. I'm like, I don't care. I'm here now. It's on. We're going to fight. I'm going to do what I can. At this point, I'm like playing to the crowd, messing with them, clapping, you know, laughing at him, smiling. Every time he did something to me, I would laugh or whatever, trying to play to the crowd, trying to keep him into it. You know, every time he threw a punch, I'm cheering, you know, shit like that. But
Eddie, let me just jump in and say, you spoke about James Toney, and it just reminds me years and years ago. This is 2013, so 7 years ago, before the podcast and all that. Ellie Seckbach, who used to watch all of his interviews back in the day, you know, a pioneer for boxing YouTube. I remember, like, he used to say, if you've got any questions, I'm going to be interviewing whoever it be, send them in. And I used to, you know, send in questions all the time. And I actually brought your name up to James Toney once in a list of names. So my question was, Name these fighters from 1 to 7. I think there's 7 names. Who's the best from best to worst? This was his answer. You've never heard this, so this is interesting. Here we go. I'll play it for you now.
Joey Coastman is asking you. I'm going to read you like 7 names of 7 different heavyweights. He wants you to list them if you could put them in order as best as you can as the best American heavyweight. Banks, Areola, Chambers, Johnson, Jennings, Wilder, Thompson, and Scott.
All of them. 100, 99, 98, 97, 96, 95, 95, 94, 93, 92.
What do you about Deontay Wilder? 29 and 0, 29.
I mean, come on, man. Deontay, John Wilder, that is.
Did you hear it good?
I did.
So I said, who's the best from... I'm like, who's the best from like 1 to 7 or whatever? And he goes, 100, 99, 98.
Yo, that's messed up, yo. But that's not, yo, that's but that's him, though. That's why, and you know what? Like most people, like, man, fuck you. Like, nah, man, that's him. He would look if you were talking to him, like if I walked up to him and talked to him in person, he would tell me, he would be respectful. You know what I mean? Because he knows. You know what I mean? And even if he didn't, I ain't gonna do nothing but laugh at it. Like, I mean, it's just like when you look at somebody that done what he's done in boxing and talking and being the way he is, I mean, what are you going to do? You think he's going to change just because I'm there? No, but he's definitely going to be respectful. He's going to, because I already met him. He talks the way he talks. That's just his way. Like, he don't think anybody could beat him. Even right now, James Toney look like he's pregnant. He still don't think nobody can beat him. And that's just how he is. And no matter what. So, I mean, I'm never going to be mad. He can say what he want to say. He can say I'm the worst heavyweight of all time. Like, thank you, James. Appreciate it. At least I'm in the conversation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. But back on to what you were saying, Eddie.
Yeah. Kind of lost track a little bit. But anyway, but the whole Derric Rossy, yo. But like I said, okay, I'm sick. We all know that. I'm still feeling a little weak. But I'm in the ring, and I remember they was like, giving it like Derric Rossy, and then they start clapping and all, and I'm like doing the clap with them on beat and everything and laughing and shit, and they announced, I think they announced him first because he was, they should have, you know what I mean? It was for the vacant USBA, and they cheered like, I mean, we in a little gym, and they made it seem like we was in freaking Caesar's Palace, at the height when De La Hoya was fighting, you know what I'm saying? Blew the roof off of that little place. And then, of course, you could hear the boos when they announced me. They blew the roof off with boos for me, and it was cool. You know what I mean? And I remember the first round, and him coming out, and he was coming forward. He was coming to knock me out. They filled his head with, "You gonna knock this bum out?" Blah blah blah. He ain't nothing but a little fat. Blah blah blah. He ain't gonna do that. And I remember, this is a little side note too, that Teddy Atlas. This was the ESPN. I think it was it Tuesday night or Friday night? I can't remember. I think it was a Friday night fight, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Joe a Friday night fight? Okay, cool. And I remember Teddy Atlas was doing, because this was the main event. He was doing the the Teddy's Keys or whatever at the time. I can't remember what it was. And he did and called it not a little bit or not close. It was exactly what I was going to do in the fight. I mean, to the T. Like, everything he said in the Keys to Victory that I was going to do, or what my plan was, is exactly what I was going to do. And it's exactly what I did. If you watch the broadcast, I don't know, for some reason I can't find it nowhere on online. But if you ever had the chance to watch that broadcast, it was to the T. Exactly that. And his thing was that, most people think the Chambers is going to move, going to go around the ring. And we know that, from what they looked at, they knew that Derric Rossy threw, like, he would like to call, like, he has a lot of fat on his punches. He throws them, looping shots, big shots. And he was saying that, Chambers, what most people think is that Chambers are going to move. He's a faster guy, blah, blah, blah. He's going to be trying to move. I think that Chambers would probably do better to have his hands up high and walk Rossy down and stay inside those big punches and land hit. And I'm like, damn, when I rewatched the rebroadcast, I was like, damn, he called it exactly like I did it. And crazy enough, like I said, I felt pretty, I was, the flu was going on. I'm playing it off, but I'm worried because I'm like, I don't know what the hell is going to happen. So the first round goes off, boom. He comes out full steam, trying to throw big shots, trying to walk me down, try to lay on me, whatever. And I remember he threw a shot, and I remember I bounced out like pretty far and tried to throw a jab, try to get him a little nervous because of the speed or whatever. And I remember just like feeling like crap, man. I mean, I remember I just felt like there was no steam on my punches. I felt sluggish and slow, and I thought it was just like, what the hell am I? I was like, man, this is going to be a long ass night. And then, thank God, at the time I didn't know that this would help, but he kept pressing. And he kept pressing, so I started to sweat. And once you start to sweat out some of the infection, and you start to, in the corner, I'm probably hacking up some stuff I can't remember for sure. Get the water, and then you start to feel. And as the fight went from 1, 2 to the 3, those rounds, I started to feel better. And each round I started to feel a little better and a little better. And then by the 5th and 6th round, it was like full out domination. I still felt a little weak and still under the weather, but I felt a whole lot better. Like I can use what I have. You know what I mean? There'll be times like if you're tired and you're weak, you won't be able to use what you have. Like you won't be able to get it off. It'll just feel like, you're in a dream. You know what I mean? You're in a dream and you're trying to punch hard, but you can't move your arms, that kind of thing. Well, I felt the exact opposite. I started to feel an energy shot. You know what I mean? And I remember round by round, just beating him. I started beating him more soundly each round, landing shots, walking him down. And this is the thing that really got to him was he's 250. I think he was 250 exactly, or 249 or 50 exactly for the fight. I was what? I can't remember. I want to say I was like 215, 216 maybe for that.
215.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's looking at, I'm gonna lay on him. I'm gonna wear him out. I'm too big. I'm a bruising. And it just didn't happen that way because now he's looking at this little guy who's not only skill-wise a lot better and a lot more developed, but I'm walking him down and I'm beating him each round and I'm beating him backwards and he starts to go backwards and you know what I mean? And now he's like, man, what do I do? You could just start, and then one eye starts to shut, then the other one starts to shut, and then you see it bleeding a little from the ear. Then I think he had a cut as well over one of his eyes, and the beating was just like, and I remember, I think if I stopped him in the 6th or 7th, was it, Joey? 6th or 7th? I think it was 7th, right. And I remember in the 6th round, right before the end of the round, I think it was the 6th round, might have been the 7th. It was the 7th, actually, when I did this. But I remember signaling to the ref, like, yo, just stop the fight. He's not going to win. You know what I mean? Like, look at him. Like, he could barely hold his arms up. He was exhausted. Both his eyes were shut. His eardrum, you could see him bleeding from the ear. You know what I mean? His nose might not have been right. There's so much stuff. I think his orbital bone was messed up. You know what I mean? After he was a mess. And the ref, because, they was, and I don't want to say this, and, I try not to ever, allude to these types of things in boxing, but I don't want to say they had to fix him, but we were fighting in his area. We were fighting his fight, his place. Everything was his. The reason we accepted that was because we really thought, I'm worlds better than this guy. He shouldn't even be in the ring with me at this stage in his career. And that's why we took the fight in this situation. But we didn't think it was going, and to be honest, we weren't really thinking that it would go to decision. You know what I mean? And at least I wasn't thinking that, and my team wasn't thinking that, especially when we saw him fight and we saw video of him, It wasn't no disrespect to him that he just wasn't really developed at that point. You know what I mean? He had, I think, 15 fights, 15-0, 9 knockouts, and he had fought, a lot of competition that would make him look good. You know what I mean? He's not fighting who he's in the ring with today. Otherwise, he would have been better prepared, but he wasn't. So we didn't expect it to go to distance. But these guys are trying to basically like, yo, man, just stay on your feet and try to go. It was a 12-round fight. It was round 7. Both his eyes were closed, bleeding from the nose, bleeding from the ear. He's done. The only way he makes it to the 12th round is if we both just sit on the stool and let the clock run out. Because if I throw a punch at him, or if he's having to stand up that much longer, he's gone. Even if I don't throw a punch. You understand what I'm saying? So even though, and I think at the time of the stoppage, they had him ahead. And I'm going to tell you, besides that first round, there was no way they had him ahead. He won one round, and it was the first round because that was basically the round I was sweating everything out in. And this is no disrespect to Derric Rossy because he had really improved over the course of his career. But up to this point, he just wasn't ready. And honestly, and this is no disrespect to him, but what I brought to the table was always going to be a little too much. He just didn't have the time to get to the point that I had gotten to. That was those years had passed him. Those developmental years were gone. So no matter what, he could have gotten better. He could have done this. He could have done that, but he would have never been up to my skill level. And it's because he missed a lot of time. And, early in his career, because he was playing football, he was doing other things. And he wasn't big enough. Like, he wasn't 6'7", 260, all ripped, maybe on some stuff to kind of use it. So he didn't have enough to keep, to overcome the skill gap. You understand what I'm saying? So, but anyway, so after the fight, so we get into that point, these guys should have been stopped the fight, but eventually the guy finally stopped the fight, which I think Arthur Mercanti Jr. was the ref, and they tried their best to keep this guy on his feet, but there was just no way. And I remember he went to the same hospital as I did because I think I got a cut over my eye too for an elbow or a head, but I'm not sure. And I had to go get the stitches, but he was a mess, man. He really was a mess. And it just goes to show, man, like when you have the opportunity and to really prepare, like say if you want to become a fighter, whatever it is you want to do, and you put the work in, no matter what the obstacles, no matter what the situation is. Like look at my situation. Most people don't look at me, even at that stage. And I started to, I was on the rise, but I'm a small heavyweight, a little chubby, most guys looking at me and saying, and they're looking like he can have all the skills in the world, but his body type and his size is really going to make it rough. Because even after I beat Derric Rossy and I fought a few fights later, they were like, yeah, he's good, man. He's really good. He's probably the best heavyweight in the world skill-wise, but the size is going to be a real problem. And I remember hearing Chris Burt say that later on, and he was like, he's great. He's got this, he's got that. And he was really, really respectful, and he was cool. But it's like he's fighting those Klitschko's and those big guys like that is going to be a real struggle. But he can do it. He's just going to have to find a way. And that's always going to be that was always going to be the issue for me. You know what I mean? Whether I was going to be able to beat those guys or not, if I had the skills to beat those guys or not, it was like he's not going to be big enough. But regardless of that, put the work in, you put the time in, you do what you got to do, and they'll put you in. You'll come to these obstacles, you'll come to these issues, and you'll be able to power through them because of the work you put in, because of the determination you've had. You know what I mean? Whether it's from my dad being on my back every day or whatever, it still got me to where I needed to be. You know what I mean? So I got to thank him for that. But this fight, in those circumstances, being sick, being in what's the terminology? In hostile territory where nobody's there for me but my team. Like it's us against the world, basically. And to be able to still just focus and finally be able to get into the fight once my body started to really react better, it was a testament to what I've done for years up to that point. And if any young fighters are listening to this, you really need to really, whatever you're doing, you know what I mean? Whatever you're thinking about, whatever's important that may be outside of what you're doing in boxing, it's not as important. If you're going to really make this your career, you have to work. You have to, hopefully your trainer's pushing you, but if you don't have that, you need to push yourself because you'll get, and Lord knows I wasn't supposed to go this far. Most people say I wasn't supposed to make it this far, or that far, even up to that point. But if you work hard, you can get anywhere you want.
Yeah, well said. And that's a brilliant fight to end on. Like I say, you picked up the USBA title just 3 months earlier. The champion was Evander Holyfield. So yeah,
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, just 3 months before you boxed for the title, and obviously you went on to defend it a few times. I'm sure we'll go over that, but yeah, brilliant fight, brilliant win. Obviously, 2 undefeated fighters in there. Derric Rossy at the time, 15-0. It's been quite interesting, obviously, talking about the referees. Obviously, Jay Nady, you mentioned Arthur Mercante Jr. I bet there's something you don't know about Arthur Mercante Jr. So he boxed as an amateur. I don't know if you knew that.
I think I knew him about that.
Do you know who he boxed in the amateurs?
No.
Juan Laporte.
Who?
You don't know Juan Laporte?
Laporte. If that, maybe the way you're saying the name.
Maybe I am, but it's, I don't know. Like,
wait. Well, wait.
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot. I think he moved through the weights. He was, he was a world champion he boxed just about everyone, man. He was a world champion, I believe, I think he was WBC world champion at, oh man.
Like a low weight, like
featherweight.
one. You talking about Juan Lascano?
No. Anyway, this guy, he boxed pretty much everyone. He boxed, I'm going to just tell you some of the names he boxed. He boxed Salvador Sanchez. He boxed Eusebio Pedrosa. He boxed Wilfredo Gomez, Barry McGuigan, Julio Cesar Chavez.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about, obviously you're talking about ways back, even before Lascano.
I'm talking about the 80s, really. John Molina, Azumah Nelson, Kostya Tszyu, Charles Murray, Teddy Reed. I want to ask you this as well. Obviously, like where you started out, I've never asked you this before, but where you started out in Pittsburgh, one of the notable boxers from Pittsburgh was... oh man, what's that guy's name? He was like 48-1, and then he went off the rails.
Paul Spadafora?
Yeah, did you ever come across him? You must have.
That's my man, Paul Spadafora. He was one of the guys that if you didn't look at him when he was talking and he was in the car with you or something like that, and he was in the back, you would swear he was a black dude. You would not. He's white as snow, but you would swear he was a black dude because he grew up in, he just grew up in those surroundings. But that's my man. I remember he came to my fights early on in my career. He was a real, and I used to kind of try to mirror some of the stuff that he did because he was slick, real slick. And he's a southpaw, and I remember he was he had that long undefeated run, and he was fighting guys that were, good fighters, but obviously, they weren't championship level guys, all of them. And I remember he had fought the one fight with Victoriano Sosa, and he knocked him down bad, like 2 or 3 times in the fight, and he came back and won. But I mean, he was one of those guys who was so slick he would end up behind guys all the time. He did it all the time. So I really tried to pick up a lot of those angles and things like that from him. But I knew Paul really, really, really well from an amateur on up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never knew that. But obviously he also had that infamous sparring session with Floyd, didn't he?
Yeah. I remember hearing about that. Floyd, from what they say is Floyd wasn't in the greatest shape. But when I look at Paul, now I'm not saying that I think he would have beat Floyd, but Paul would be a tough matchup for Floyd because Floyd, even though Floyd's a good puncher at those weights, I mean, when we talk about 135 going up, like he was a good puncher, but we got to look at what Paul's strengths were. They were defensive. You know what I mean? He was a good offensive fighter, but his defensive movement and his footwork was what really set him apart. And Floyd is going to have to come to a guy like that. Like, he's not going to run. I'm not saying he's running, but he's going to try to outfox you. That's Paul's style. And Floyd is obviously, most people, he's the number one guy that, with doing that. But it's just the style matchup. Him being a southpaw for one makes it a little harder. Him being supremely slick is another aspect as a southpaw that is going to make it hard for Floyd. Not saying that Floyd wouldn't have won, but that would have been a tougher fight than most people realize.
Yeah, for sure. No, another interesting thing there to just put a cherry on the icing on top of the cake. But yeah, that's been another episode there of the Lockdown Knockdown. Like we said, we're moving on to the bigger fights now. We're getting there. And next time, Eddie, I guess we'll be speaking about what's kind of coming next. I don't know if there's any interest in, training camps that you want to speak about next time or whatever around that kind of time. But the fights, of course, that followed the Derric Rossy win. are, Dominic Gwynn, Calvin Brock, and Alexander Povetkin. So they're going to be interesting. Any training camps around that time that we'll speak about?
All the training camps now are mine. You know what I'm saying? As we're now moving to that stage, now I'm going. I went to camp down in Florida for the next fight, so I can say that. And, we'll go from there. And the funniest thing is, as much, and it was hot at that time, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was close to the summertime. Actually, it was May. It was in May. Matter of fact, we fought the day before De La Hoya fought. Who the hell? It was a huge
Trinidad,
fight.
Maybe?
Was it? It might have been.
Just a guess.
It was on Cinco de Mayo. They fought on Cinco. I think they fought on Cinco de Mayo. Mine was on the 4th. I fought Dominic Gwynn at the Palms, and I want to say, and it's funny, Chris Earl fought Malcolm Tan. I remember Malcolm Tan. A lot of people don't remember Malcolm Tan, but anyway, it was I know, and you know what's crazy is I remember guys that I watched, like NBA guys, right? Seeing me, and this was like, he was just making it to the NBA. There's a guy, but you guys don't even know him. He was in the league for a while and he was doing all right, but he wasn't, But a kid by the name of Corey Brewer, who was in the NBA for a while. And I remember them dudes looking at me like, yo, that's the dude, right? Like looking at me like I'm like a star or something. And I'm like, I headlined the card, but I'm not really that yet. Like, I'm like, y'all guys are in the NBA. I should be looking at y'all. That's how I was thinking at the time. I'm not thinking I'm anything special. But I'm fighting on I'm headlining these cards now, and, I'm moving up and moving up and moving up. And it's like, wow, you know what I mean? Now you're starting to get respect from other athletes, and they're actually starting to mention your name sometimes. Like, I've actually heard a few guys mention my name, and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. So, as it goes on, these types of things come up. So, we'll get into that the next time.
Yeah, we'll certainly get there. And just checking it, because that guess at Felix Trinidad was a complete wild guess. I was 8 years too late. Of course, the fight that you're talking about was Floyd Mayweather and Oscar De La Hoya.
Wow, that was it, wasn't it? Yeah, that was it. I remember watching it too. I think I watched it after mine because I think. Wait, did we watch it? Yeah, we watched it. I can't remember where we watched it though. Yeah. Okay. Or did we? Yeah, we watched it. No, we watched it at home because we flew back. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, yeah,
but anyway.
So yeah, we'll get on to all these things next time. But that is it. That is it for the talking. We brought you the review part, the news part, the preview part. Eddie's brought you another edition of his Lockdown Knockdown. We love that. And it's now time to welcome our sole guest on this week's podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the former WBC Super-Featherweight World Champion. It is, of course, Mr. James Leija. Jesse, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. So, Jesse, I want to ask you, of course, you're San Antonio born and raised. What was life like when you was, a kid in that part of Texas coming up?
Well, I didn't start fighting until I was 19 years old. Mm-hmm. But my dad was a boxer back in the 60s, and I was born in 66. So my dad's career had kind of ended before when I was born. But he was a boxer, and he was actually the first San Antonian to ever make it to the National Golden Gloves finals here in the United States. And that's a big deal. That's a real big deal back then, to make it to the Golden Gloves finals. Then after that, he turned pro, and back then they were just fighting, to make money, to support their family and stuff. But he was a pretty good fighter, and he could punch. He fought. In fact, when he fought in the Golden Gloves when he was young, I guess he was 17, 18 years old. He fought at 112. At the end of his boxing career, when he stopped fighting, he was fighting at 150. So he had a lot of power. He was a power puncher, but didn't make a lot of money, but fought some good fights, but didn't let us fight.
Okay.
He didn't want us to fight as boxers because it's a rough sport. He didn't want his sons fighting.
Okay, that's interesting. That brings me on really to my next question. What's your earliest memory, of starting to box? Perhaps first putting on a pair of gloves, if you like.
Well, when my dad was training, we would go to the gym and watch him train. I was probably 4 years old at the time, and this is when he was making a brief comeback in the 1969, 1970. So I was 4 or 5 years old, and I would go to the gym and we would watch him box and you know, put some gloves on like typical kids and box inside the ring. And and then every single day probably at my house, my brother and I would put on the gloves. Anytime a big fight would come on, we would put the gloves on and box each other, or put socks in our hands and, you know, slap box for the whole fight, and I would always get beat up.
And obviously, you know, you were an amateur for a while. I think you only had about 28 fights, so not a real long amateur career. I believe it lasted about 3 years. What was your highlight moment, if you had one, of the amateur game?
You know what? It's ironic that you asked that. 4 days ago, I got a video of one of my final fights as an amateur. I was fighting in the Western Olympic trials in 1988, and I had to fight 4 fights in a row, and the last fight, the 4th fight, being against a ranked guy in the United States by the name of Michael Black, and I was able to see that. I've never seen that fight. I've never seen the fight, and someone sent it to me the other day, and I posted on my Facebook. But that was a great fight, and it was a tough fight. But that was a great fight for me because the winner went to the Olympic trials, and that was getting me to the Olympic trials. I only had 30 amateur fights at the time. He had 95 fights. And I beat him, and I went on to the Olympic trials, and I lost to the Olympian Kelsey Banks.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, like I say, quite a brief amateur career. But let's get on to the pro career. You made your debut October 2nd, 1988 in San Antonio. You boxed a guy by the name of Oscar Davis. You got him out there in the first round. Do you recall much of your debut? Do you remember being nervous at all?
Oh yeah, I remember that fight clearly. Oscar Davis was probably like almost 6 foot tall, 125 pounds. And I'm 5'5", and so I knew but I had so much confidence. I knew I was a good fighter because, you know, I fought in the Olympic trials, so that means you're a decent fighter. So you had to be special if you were going to beat me at that time. You know, and plus, you know, it was in San Antonio. I know the game, but you don't know what the guy's capable of doing. It only takes one punch in boxing to end the fight. So you're still nervous, and you're fighting in San Antonio in front of your fans. So it's exciting, nervous, and all that put together. But, you know, I was able to put him out in the first round, and it was a great start to a long career.
Yeah, and like I say, it wasn't really an easy start. You know, you had tests pretty much straight away. I want to skip forward to April of 1989. You boxed Manuel Gomez, who at the time was only 1-0. Of course, he went on to challenge twice for world titles. But at that stage, you know, yourself or him hadn't really done much as pros at that point. The fight was only a 4-rounder. You were down in the first round, but you managed to win unanimously. Like I say, only in a 4-rounder. We don't get to see that too often. Do you remember much about that fight there?
Yes. And he actually went on to fight like 154 pounds. He was a big guy when I first fought him. But he caught me with a good punch. It was a good punch, but I was a little off balance in the first round. I went down, got back up right away, and then just pushed hard for the next 3 rounds because I knew it's a 4-round fight. You can't get behind very quick. So I fought hard the next 3 rounds, and it was a great fight. Then I went on later on, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, I saw him fighting big fights and on TV.
Yeah, like I say, he went on to challenge twice for world titles in the future. 18 months after that fight there, by this point you're 15-0 with 10 KOs. Back in San Antonio, you box Edward Parker in a 10-round contest. It was the first time you'd actually gone past 6 rounds as well. So the fight goes all 10. The fight ends in a split draw. Do you remember much about that night there?
Yeah, I remember everything about that fight. Good fighter, a lefty, I believe. Edward Parker was a lefty, I believe. But he's very slick and just very knowledgeable. He's been a fighter for a long time. And it was a close fight. You know, if you ever watch some of my other fights on TV, fighters, the broadcasters always refer back to that fight that, you know, they claim that they all knew I won the fight, but that sometimes some of the judges wanted to make it sure that they weren't voting on a San Antonio fighter. Like they weren't going to do a hometown thing, so they go the other way, kind of. But 2 or 3 broadcasters always said I wanted to fight fairly easy, but they made it a draw. But no matter what happened, it was a good fight, good learning experience for me, and you learn to dust yourself off and keep fighting. And I didn't lose, so it was okay for me. I was ready to go.
Yeah, and like I say, that draw there, whatever, it should have been a win, of course, but that draw, spurred you on for some brilliant things, because after that draw, you put together an 11-fight win streak, which included, wins over the likes of former world title challenger Mark Fernandez, future world title challenger Miguel Arrozal, former world title challenger and Olympic gold medalist Steve McCrory, former world title challenger Jesus Pole, former IBF world champion Troy Dorsey, and then, of course, 2-weight world champion Louis Espinoza, before then getting your first attempt at a world title. So, like I say, you put together this brilliant win streak, and the world title attempt takes place on Friday, September 10th, 1993 at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. You're 26-0 with that one draw at the time. The champion in the opposite corner, 36-2 with one draw. That man, of course, being Azumah Nelson. He put his WBC Super-Featherweight title on the line. The fight results in a split draw over 12 rounds. Tell us about that one there.
First of all, what a list of fighters before Azumah Nelson.
Exactly, man.
Louis Espinoza, Troy Dorsey, Miguel Arrozal. Man, I had a list, and that was a good matchmaking. My manager, Lester Bedford, had confidence in me to be able to put me up against those great fighters, and that got me ready for Azumah Nelson. But after I fought Louis Espinoza, I knew that I belonged in the game. I knew that I was capable of doing big things in boxing because I beat a great champion, someone that can punch with both hands. Matter of fact, after that fight with Louis Espinoza, I had 5 cuts all over my face because of just how hard he hit.
Wow.
But it was just a good fight for me. But fighting Azumah Nelson was the ultimate. And let me tell you a story about that. When I fought Azumah Nelson, they came down to San Antonio about a month early before the fight because they wanted to get acclimated to the weather, or because it's hot in San Antonio, and the time change. So I'm in the gym. This is probably about 4 weeks before the fight. And Azumah's going to train at the same gym that I'm training at. And, but at a different time. I wasn't trained from 4 to 6, and he wasn't trained from 6 to 8. But one day he comes in at 4 o'clock with his crew. They all walk in his training camp and his sparring partners and everyone else. And one of his trainers come up to me and ask me that Azumah Nelson wants to spar with me. This is 4 weeks before our fight.
Wow.
And I looked at him, and so you know what Azumah is doing? Azumah is playing mind games with me. What he's saying is, I'm not even worried about you. I'm willing to spar you right now if you want, but I'm going to beat you during the fight. That's how confident he was, or just playing mind games. And I told the trainer, no, don't worry. We'll fight. We have 4 weeks to go. We'll fight him in the big fight. And so that's how we left it. But it was funny because, he was playing mind games with me. And it was good because he got in my mind at that time.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, that win streak with all those impressive names was just quite unbelievable. I went through it very quickly, but just amazing wins there. And yeah, that Azumah Nelson fight, of course, he was announced as the winner, if I'm not mistaken, until one of the judges realized he'd miscalculated his scorecard. That's right?
Yeah. So matter of fact, they announced him the winner. We go back to and I thought I won the fight, but it was a close fight, and I saw some mistakes I made trying to protect the lead that I had, and which is a no-no in boxing. You don't try to protect the lead, you keep winning. But anyway, I go back to my dressing room, and within a couple of minutes, they come in and tell me that the fight was declared a draw because someone made a mistake on the scorecards. And I was okay with that. It didn't bother me. I wasn't happy or sad because I thought I won the fight anyway, so it didn't do anything for me. I just, I figured, okay, well, that's good. Maybe there'll be a rematch.
Yeah.
And there was a rematch.
Yeah, of course. And immediately after the fight, again, you took a keep busy fight against Thomas Valdez. You stopped him in 3 rounds before the rematch took place. It was 8 months after the first fight. This time it takes place in Las Vegas, May 7th, 1994. Tell us about the night you became champion of the world, Jesse.
Yeah, before that, though, remember there was the fight that was supposed to happen before that was canceled, I believe. Yeah, it was canceled, the rematch. It was a January fight, and that was canceled. We had to wait till May for the rematch, and because Azumah Nelson had got hurt. And then the May 7th, 1994, we had the rematch in Vegas. And I went into the fight doing the same thing I did in the first fight. But the only thing I said I was not going to do was I was not going to protect the lead I had or I would have during the fight. So the last 4 rounds or 5 rounds, I went after him. I put more pressure on him and made sure I won the fight fairly and that there was going to be no doubt that I was going to win the fight against Azumah.
And describe just to me the best you can what it feels like, or felt like, I should say, to become a world champion, to hear those 3 words and the new after a good performance over 12 rounds. You won unanimously, of course.
I get that question asked to me every once in a while, and I always tell people it's indescribable of what you feel like inside, because first of all, you're excited, but beyond belief. Everything that you've worked for, all the fights that you've had, the amateur fights, pro fights, every single mile you've run in your career, in your life, the punches you've taken in the gym, in the ring, during fights. It's really hard to describe. And I always tell people that it's like telling a mom who gave birth, how did it feel to give birth? It's unexplainable. And so winning a world title like that, it's kind of unexplainable. You're on top of the world at the time and you feel great. You've accomplished something incredible, and that's what you feel like. But to put those into words, I wouldn't do it justice.
Yeah, I love asking that question because I always hear, basically boxers getting quite lost for words, really trying to explain it. It's interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Just 4 months later, you return to the ring to defend your world title against former world title challenger Gabriel Ruelas at the MGM Grand. Of course, Ruelas had boxed Azumah Nelson about 18 months prior. That was where he lost, a majority decision. It was quite a close fight, if I remember. But this time, luck was on his side. He was able to beat you unanimously over 12 rounds. Tell us about that one.
Just a tough fight. Early on the fight, he caught me with the overhand right. He dropped me. I think it was the second round. He caught me in the second round. Matter of fact, I was talking to somebody about that today at the gym. When he dropped me, I tore my ligament in my ankle, and I fought 10 rounds that way. And it was still a close fight, but I dropped him, I think, in the 6th or 7th round. But I had never had balance after that. It was my right leg. Never had balance, and it was just a tough hill for me to climb, fighting one leg against a great fighter like Gabriel Ruelas. And I didn't fight for that. I didn't fight again after that fight for 9 months to let my leg heal. But it was disappointing on my side because I knew I was a better fighter. I just knew I was a better fighter, but things happened, and he caught me with a good punch. He dropped me, and I tore my ankle at the time and had to fight 10 rounds with a torn ankle. And still gave him a tough fight.
Yeah, like I say, credit to you for finishing on your feet with that injury. 8 months later, you were back. You came back and completely shut out Jeff Mayweather over 10 rounds. 2 months after that, you stopped Rodney Garnett in 7, and that's when you were given another shot at a world title, this time at the Madison Square Garden in New York. December 15th, 1995 was the date for the WBO lightweight world title against the then champion Oscar De La Hoya. It was a short night, obviously. Your corner pulled you out after just 2 rounds. Tell us about that fight there.
I knew nothing about this guy, this kid named Oscar De La Hoya. I'm teasing. I'm teasing. So I knew that, nobody wanted to fight Oscar at the time. Nobody wanted to fight him at the time. And I said, heck, I'll fight him. So one thing that I did in my career was I didn't want to take easy fights because that doesn't get you anywhere. I took the hard road. I traveled the hard road I challenged myself to be the best, to be a great. And I fought guys that were bigger than me, Oscar and all these other guys that just, outweighed me or just whatever. But I wanted to fight the best guys in the world. I fought the best fighters pound for pound in the world in my era. And that's what a fighter does. He challenges himself, and that's what I want to do. I didn't want easy fights. I wanted hard fights. And so I offered to fight Oscar in Madison Square Garden. And just, I gave it all I had, and that's all I could do is give it the best. And I lost, and he's a great fighter, and it proved to be a great fighter. He was a Hall of Fame fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. And 6 months after that was when you had the trilogy fight against Azumah Nelson. He managed to, have a rematch with Gabriel Ruelas. He stopped him in 5 rounds. He got, he got his old belt back, if you like, and you got a shot here at your old title, back down at super featherweight from lightweight, of course, back in Las Vegas again. June the 1st, 1996. This time, however, you'd lose by TKO in round 6. Quite a shocking result, looking back now. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, it was shocking for me too. He stopped me because I was cut really bad, but he was beating me anyway. He was gonna beat me either way. He was gonna stop me, but I was cut, and that's why they stopped the fight. But he was gonna beat me that night. It was one of those nights that felt weird. There's a funny story behind this, and I don't know if you want me to talk about it, but it's a funny story because Azumah Nelson in his book wrote that when I beat him in Vegas for the title on our second fight, that he thinks I put a hex on him, and that was funny because in our third fight when we were in the ring, and I got into the ring first because Azumah was the champion. And they're bringing him out in all his people with the hairdress or whatever you call it, whatever they do in Africa. They're playing the drums and the bongos and everything else. He's coming into the ring. I look at my dad and I said, something's different. Something feels weird. I had so much energy before that. And right as he's walking in, my legs were weak. My body was weak. And I looked at my dad and I said, something's wrong. Meaning like it felt like someone put a curse on me. And so when Azumah Nelson and I talked a few years ago, we laughed about it because he thinks I hexed him and I say he hexed me. So it was funny about that.
Must have been something in the air.
So those were our excuses, no matter what.
And of course, after that, you embark on a 6-fight win streak, which included 2 wins over the eventual world title challenger, Joel Perez, before boxing Azumah Nelson for the 4th and final time, July 11th, 1998. 22 years ago this week, the fight took place at the Alamo Dome. You were able to win unanimously over 12 rounds. Tell us about that final fight between you both, and of course, just the feeling that you closed that chapter with a win again.
Yeah, and that was tough for me because you have to remember I just got beat Azumah Nelson a few fights before, and he stopped me. Yeah. So he still had the power, he still had the technique, the speed, and everything else, and he was a tough fighter. And so I knew I was going to be in for a tough fight, but I was ready for it. To me, it was like something happened in that third fight, and he beat me first square. But in the 4th fight, I just did what I did in the first 2 fights. I just put pressure on him. I used my movement. I had, kept a jab in his face, and I was out punching him. So I did the same thing I did in the first 2 fights. But it was a great fight for me, and a great win, and a great way to end the 4-fight series with Azumah Nelson.
Which of the 4 fights did you feel was the most satisfying for you? Was it that 4th one? Obviously, it wasn't the 3rd one, of course.
No, yeah, the second one. It was the second one because I knew I won that. I have a big thing that I won the first fight, and I just wanted to make something right, and it was my first world title. It was my first world title, and then the second world title was our 4th fight. It was a world champion.
Yeah, no, that's interesting to know. And 4 months later, you get another shot at a world title, this time the IBF lightweight world title. So you're back up at lightweight against the then champion Sugar Shane Mosley. I don't suppose you look back on that fight with the fondest of memories, but let's speak about it. You were down, I think, 3 times it was. Your corner stopped it while you were on your stall at the end of round 9, but, you know, you showed your toughness there once again. That was a tough fight. Yeah,
it was. It was incredibly tough. And so there's always a story behind every fight. There's a story in every single one of my fights. But this story, to me, says a lot about my fortitude, about my drive. So I was supposed to fight Gabe Ruelas in a rematch before the Shane Mosley fight. And I was supposed to fight Gabe Ruelas again. But during training, I heard one of my sparring partners hit me in the back and separated my rib from the front sternum. And this was in 98. So I had this injury the rest of my career. So I said to myself, I'm not going to fight Gabe again being hurt. It was a 10-round fight with Gabe. I said, I'm not going to fight being hurt. So we pulled out of the fight with Gabe because of my rib. 2 weeks later, I get the call. My manager gets a call to fight Shane Mosley for all 3 belts. You never say no to a world title fight. So they gave me a 3-week notice. I had to drop 17 pounds in 3 weeks to fight Shane Mosley. I thought I was going to die during weigh-in. I was so weak. Think about it. I wasn't ready for a fight because I really had postponed the fight with Gabe Ruelas, and so I didn't train for the next 2 weeks, and then I had to drop 17 pounds. I dropped 17 pounds, and then I go 9 rounds with Shane Mosley. And ironically, about a month ago, he posted on Facebook that I gave him one of the toughest fights he's ever had at 135.
Wow.
And I only had 3 weeks notice. Yeah, I had to. So that I'm happy about that. I mean, I lost the fight and I felt devastated. I hated losing. But, you know, all you can do in your career and all you do in your life is give 100%, give your best, and you can, if you win, you have your head up high. If you lose, you keep your head up.
Yeah, and what he said there, that speaks volumes because, you know, Sugar Shane at 135, that was probably his best. Well, that was his best weight. You know, he was such a brilliant fighter there. Some people would say one of the best. Dangerous. Yeah, one of the best lightweights of all time. So, yeah, that's a big compliment there. You know, on 3 weeks' notice, like you said.
Yeah.
After that Mosley fight, of course, you put together a further 3 wins before boxing Juan Lezcano, the Hispanic causing panic, one of the best nicknames in boxing history for me. The fight, though, ends controversially. A split decision loss for you over 10. I'm not quite sure you agree with the outcome. Tell us about it. August 2000 in Connecticut.
Yeah, I mean, it was Gary's promoter, Gary Shaw. So we all know Gary Shaw's, you know, his promoting. But, you know, there was a fight that Bobby Ches was calling, broadcasting the fight. He was a play-by-play. And Albert, not Marv Albert, but his brother. And they had me win. They had a Showtime voting during the fight. It was on Showtime TV. They had the Showtime online voting. And the people had me winning 10 rounds to 0. I didn't think it was 10 rounds. I thought it was 7-3. But they gave the fight to Juan Lezcano, and everyone knew what happened. And I'm glad it was on TV because people knew he didn't win the fight and that I won the fight. And so I had some justification over that. But it's still a loss, and it still hurts. I hate seeing that 7 losses in my career because it should have been 6, not 7. And I hate seeing that 7th loss.
Yeah, no, I understand. And 3 months later, you're back. You grab a unanimous decision win over former world title challenger and 2-time beater of Arturo Gatti, Ivan Robinson. 2 months after that, you beat Fred Ladd. 6 months after that, you get the fight against Hector Camacho Jr. Now, he, of course, was 32-0 at the time. The fight took place on July 7th, 2001 in Brooklyn. The fight ends prematurely, though. A no contest in the end of everything after 5 rounds when... Of course, your team, I believe your team went to the board or whatever to sort out a strange decision at the time. A technical decision on the night was given to Camacho, but very weird.
Yeah, it was a weird call. we said we should have won the fight because he was cut, and the doctor said he could fight, and he did not want to fight.
Mm-hmm.
So they called him the winner of the fight, the whole bit. But when we protested, and what they came out with, that the fight is a no contest because the bell for the 6th round should have never have rung. And so that's why it was a no contest, which was just, you know, saving themselves from a bad call. But my career didn't hurt from that. They made a no contest. I went on to big fights after that, and Camacho's career was devastated afterwards. Yeah. And I think he got a bad call as far as someone telling him not to fight. I don't think it was him. I think it was his corner thinking that they had a lead in the fight, and they made him stop. And so his career suffered for that.
Yeah. And, 6 months after, that's when you had your next fight back in San Antonio against the Irish tough man, Micky Ward. It was his last fight before he had those 3 back-to-back fights against Arturo Gatti, in which he retired after those 3. So, you're the last guy to fight him before Gatti. But you were able to beat him via a technical decision after just 5 rounds. I think there was a head clash in there. Tough fight, but tell us about that one. Good win again.
Very, very tough fight. I mean, he's very tough, and I was hitting him with some clean punches, and I would hurt him a little bit, but he's just as tough as nails. And so we had a slight headbutt in the 2nd round, I believe. Maybe it was the 1st round. A slight headbutt. And I looked at the ref, and I said, watch his head, because Mickey was coming in with his head. As soon as it happened, I looked at the ref and said, watch his head. And so I got the cut, and I hear his corner the whole time, the whole fight, saying, go for his cut, like to hit me in the cut. And I'm thinking during the fight, like, why would you go for my cut? They called it a headbutt. You would lose if I'm ahead on the score point, on the scorecard. And so anyhow, what I was trying to do was I was trying to win rounds while he was trying to make the cut worse. And so I knew that if he made the cut worse, that they're going to go to the scorecard, and I better win these rounds because they can go to the scorecard if he makes the cut. And that's all he concentrated on was the cut. I even told him this a few years ago. I said, man, you kept making that cut worse, and you kind of did us both a favor. The fight got stopped early, and he laughed about it. But I think that's what happened. He was going for the cut, and I was going for the win.
And after that, you're out the ring for a year and 2 weeks. So quite inactive there. Maybe even the longest layoff of your career before you jump straight in with the WBC, IBF and WBA Super Lightweight World Champion. So we're up at 140 now. Of course, I'm talking about Kostya Tszyu. You had to travel to Melbourne, Australia for the fight. Am I right in saying, Jesse, that you flew out there 6 months prior to the fight?
No, I've read that before. It never happened. But first of all, I can't believe I took a year off before the Kostya Tszyu fight.
Yeah.
Was it that long before a fight?
Yeah, 54 weeks.
I didn't realize it. Wow, that's a long time. No, we only went out there 2 weeks before the fight. I went out there 2 weeks before the fight, before Kostya Tszyu. Okay. Not 6 months.
Yeah, that's quite strange. I was thinking that's a pretty long time to get acclimatized when I read that. But
that would be nice though. 6 months in Melbourne would be beautiful. It's a beautiful country.
But yeah, just tell us about that one. Obviously, you were pulled out by your corner after 6 completed rounds, and also just the whole experience. Really, like you say, it was. It sounds like a nice place. Spending 6 months would have been nice. What was the whole experience like traveling to a place like that to fight a guy like him?
Yeah, first of all, amazing people there in Melbourne, in Australia. They treated us with nothing but class. I loved it there. I love the people there. I love Kostya Tszyu is a great guy. Everybody was just top notch. The fight was great. I was doing great in the first fight. I was doing great in the first few rounds. I got a busted eardrum probably in the 5th round. But, one of the things that was just devastating me was that injured rib that I had, that separated rib I had 4 years ago, 5 years before that. it just was devastating. And he hit me in that rib early on in the round, and my corner knew my rib was shot, and it just they just called the fight because of the injury. Not so much the eardrum, that's what was reported. But one thing I never said anything about my rib because I didn't want people to really concentrate on the rib, but he did, and he hit me around the rib, and that was the end of that.
And then, of course, after that, you put together a four-fight win streak before you also boxed on the undercard of Pacquiao Barrera, didn't you, at some point during that, I believe?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was here in San Antonio.
Yeah.
And I can't recall who I fought, but yeah, it was a decent fight. I think I got the guy out of there in 3 or 4 rounds, and then I was able to watch the Pacquiao Barrera fight, which is a great fight.
Yeah, it was Fernando Mina, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I stopped him in the second, I believe.
There we go. And then, yeah, your final fight, you boxed the late Arturo Gatti. You were down twice in the 5th round where the knockout loss came. Yeah, just tell us about that one.
Just, again, a good fight. Injuries. I was 38 years old at the time. Just, wear and tear on my body throughout the years just caught up with me. I had a good fight with Bojado before the Gatti fight. I had a great fight with Bojado. But during the fight with Bojado, the first 4 rounds, I was so close to just taking a knee and calling it a career because of that rib injury. He kept hitting me there with straight right hands to the rib. And I was just looking. I tell people this so many times that I was looking for a spot to take a knee and say, I'm done, because I couldn't take the pain anymore. So in doing that, I was so close to just taking a knee and say, I'm done. That's my career. But by the time I knew it was the 6th round, and I knew I was winning the fight. And ironically, he didn't hit me there anymore, or maybe I would have taken a knee, and that got me the win, and it got me to the Gatti fight afterwards. And with Gatti, tough fighter. We all know he's a tough fighter, but he completely surprised us because we thought he was going to come after me and try and knock me out, but kind of he played. I think Buddy McGirt told me this last year, was that they didn't want to box. They didn't want to slug with me because he told Gatti, you're not going to slug with Leija, you're going to box him. And Gatti got upset. He got upset because Buddy McGirt wanted him to box. He wanted to come after me. And Buddy McGirt said, no, you're going to box him because he's too smart. He's too smart in there. He's going to pick you apart, and he's going to pick you apart inside the ring. If you try to slug with him, you need to box him. And that's what they did. They caught us completely by surprise because we never thought he was going to try to outbox me and use his reach and distance from the outside. And he did that. And while him doing that made me have to force the action, and that's why I got caught.
Yeah, like I said, we didn't get to see much boxing prior to that from Arturo Gatti. It was very much a seek and destroy type of fighter. So yeah, you called it a career. I believe just the week after that fight there, obviously a very impressive record and resume. Most importantly, 47-7 with 2 draws. It should have been 48-6 with 2 draws. I want to ask you a couple of kind of, quick questions about, just things that took place in your career, whatever. I want to ask you this. Did you ever have the itch at any point to come back? I know this injury seemed to get worse and worse over time, but was there ever a period where you thought, you know what, maybe I could come back and have 1 or 2 more, or not?
Well, no, that's why I fought till I was 38, because I knew I was too old to come back. But at one point after I retired, Julio Cesar Chavez called me out. He had mentioned my name after a fight that he would want to fight me next. And that was probably about 6 to 7 months after I retired. Nothing ever materialized from that, and so I called it a career. I was good to go.
Okay. And I want to ask you this as well. Who was the hardest puncher you ever boxed? I'm expecting you to say probably one of the bigger names, but I also want to point out Jose Rodriguez. He could punch as well. I remember you boxed him.
Yes. The name that's every time someone says who's the hardest puncher, I always got to say Oscar De La Hoya, the hardest puncher. And when I say that, I tell people he's knocked out people at 130. He knocked out people at 135, 140, 147, 154, and 160. So he had a lot of power.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to ask you this. Do you have any existing regrets? If you could go back and change something, would you?
Not that I know of. I think I did everything the right way. I challenged the best fighters in the world. I won 2 world titles. I fought Azumah Nelson 4 times. I have a great resume in all the fighters I had. I had the same manager from day one. I did it the right way, I believe.
Okay. And you did. You're 100% right. You boxed all the big names. You certainly did. But was there anyone that you'd have liked to fight but didn't get the opportunity to do so?
You know, maybe that rematch with Gabe Ruelas would have been a good one.
Yeah.
It just didn't happen because of the rib injury, and then I fought Shane Mosley afterwards. But that would have been a good one to, just to redeem myself because I knew I was a better fighter. But that's it. I don't have any regrets. I did it the right way. We fought the best fighters. I made good money. I fought on Showtime, and I was on TV. Of my 57 fights, I think I was on TV at least 44 times or 40 times. So I got good publicity. My name was pretty big in the 80s and 90s. I think we did great. We had a great team.
And I want to ask you, we spoke about the hardest puncher. Who was the best opponent, though, all around, like the best?
Well, see, I get some flack from it because I tell people and people, when I explain it, people kind of say you're right. He was probably the best all-around fighter. But, it's because I beat this guy. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't mean he was the best just because I beat him. But, like Oscar had the height and he had the power. Shane Mosley had the speed and movement. Azumah Nelson had power and aggressiveness. But there was one guy who had everything. And I beat him, though. But one guy had everything was Francisco Bojado. He had power, he had speed, he had ring savvy, he had experience, he had everything. But one thing I think he was lacking was work ethic. Maybe he didn't work as hard, but I was able to beat him in that one fight. But I think, everyone, it wasn't me, it was everyone else saying he was probably the best fighter to come around since Oscar De La Hoya.
Yeah, that was a good win, of course, but another win that, I probably should have stopped when we mentioned this and we were going through the timeline, but a brilliant win for you has to be Troy Dorsey. Especially at that time, not just because he was a former world champion, but, when you actually think, he'd been in there with the likes of Kevin Kelly, the likes of Jorge Paez, the likes of Manuel Medina, Tom Johnson, all these brilliant fighters. They couldn't stop him. You got him out of there. That was a real statement. Again, that's a brilliant win.
Yeah, we had a great game plan for that fight. Troy Dorsey was coming straight. Troy Dorsey is relentless, and he and I became good friends after that, and we still speak to this day. But I told Troy 1 or 2 more rounds, and I was done because I was so tired of that pressure he was putting on me. He was relentless and nonstop, and I told him 1 or 2 more rounds, and he probably would have got me out. So he was happy about that. But it was a great win for me. It was on NBC TV, so it helped my ratings and it helped my name. It was a good win.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to ask you this, Jesse. What are you up to these days? What gets you out of bed these days?
Well, I have a boxing fitness gym with my sons here in San Antonio, and we train businessmen, businesswomen, young kids, amateur fighters. We train the San Antonio Spurs. We kind of train everybody here in San Antonio, and it's a good business, and we're doing well.
No, I'm pleased to hear that, my friend. And, of course, you've got that brilliant picture of yourself and Muhammad Ali. You see your display picture, and I've seen it a couple of times. Was that the only time you met him? How was that?
That's the only time I had seen him before, but when I met him was in 2005 after I retired. there was a teachers conference here in San Antonio, and I called my attorney, who's a good friend of mine, and I said, I have to meet Ali. I have to meet him. He's in San Antonio. There may never be another chance he comes to San Antonio. I have to meet him. He goes, well, let's go down there and try to meet him. So we go down to the convention hall, and there's a big desk set up with people. People are registering people in to come in. And I talked to the lady that's up front, and I said, we were invited. I'm making this up, of course. I said, we were invited by Ali's camp to come and meet the champ. And she looks for my name on the list, and I'm not on the list. She goes, I don't see you on the list. I said, I'm not on the list. We were invited by him to come and meet him. I'm kind of thinking he may know who I am, maybe. I don't know. But I'm just trying anything I can to try to meet him. And this goes on for about 10 minutes.
Oh, God.
Other people are looking for my name on the list, and I'm not on the list. And I'm telling them I'm not on the list, but we were invited by him. And someone that recognizes me says, Mr. Leija, how can I help you? And I said, well, we were invited by the champ to come and meet him here at this. And she goes, hold on 1 second. She goes and gets a security guard. And I look at my attorney and I said, oh, they're kicking us out. And the security guard goes, come follow me, Mr. Leija. And so he walks through a couple of doors. He goes down the hall, and we walk into a room, and it's Muhammad Ali and his wife, Lani, inside their suite.
Wow.
And I stayed there for an hour talking with them and taking pictures and joking around with them. So it was amazing.
I bet you'll never
probably
forget that.
Probably the highlight. Probably next to winning my world title, the highlight of my boxing career.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. That's amazing, man. I love that. That's beautiful. What a brilliant story. And I just want to ask you the last two questions, Jesse. You had a brilliant career. You're doing something you love right now with your son, which is brilliant. Are you a happy man? We speak to a lot of boxers. Some of them aren't happy at the end of everything. Are you a happy man these days in 2020?
Oh yeah. I mean, I have a great life. I've been married for 31 years with my wife. That we've been together since we were 12 years old. I have two amazing sons. I have two amazing sons that work with us. That work with me, and I get to see every day. Had a great career, and I'm still working now, and I'm having fun doing it. It almost doesn't seem like work because you enjoy it. And so I think it's not about the money. It's about being happy, and I'm a happy man. So to me, I've made it.
Yeah, you're still winning at life, even in 2020.
Still winning.
Brilliant, man.
Still winning, yes, sir.
And I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, but this is a question we ask to everyone that we speak to from overseas, Jesse. I want to ask you this. This will be interesting. Who's your favourite UK fighter, any era? UK fighter. Who springs to mind?
Wow, that's a great question. There's been so many great fighters, and there's so many of them. I can't remember them all, but for some reason, when you said UK fighter, Prince Nassim Hamed always pops into my head.
Yeah.
That's what I see. What an amazing... He fought in the 90s, of course, and every time he fought was an amazing attraction. He had power in both hands. He was a small guy like me, 125 pounds. He was amazing. He had some great fights. So right off the bat, I have to say, Prince Nassim Hamed, and you know what? A good friend of mine, Ricky Hatton, another great fighter, Ricky Hatton.
Yeah, two very popular answers. Prince Nassim Hamed, pretty much everyone says his name when I ask that question. We had Kevin Kelly on last week's show. Of course, there was a lot to talk about there with him.
Yeah.
And just finally, if you've got any closing words just to sign out with, Jesse, before we let you go. I'm guessing you probably don't speak to the UK media too often. You've got a lot of fans over here. What's your message to those guys that support you from overseas?
Well, first of all, I mean, you can't not do it without the fans. I mean, we do what we do a lot of times because of the fans and the support they give us. Even if they don't know us, we know there's people supporting us. I visited London before, and I went out to Wales, and I enjoyed it. The people are amazing there. And, just from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank them for being themselves and being true sports fans, not only in boxing, but in football and cricket and everything else you guys do over there, but amazing sports fans. And I'm just proud that I was able to meet so many of them when I was in London and Wales.
Excellent, my friend. I thank you on behalf of the UK boxing fans. Listen, Jesse, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you this week. Thank you so much for your time. Best wishes with everything. I hope we can speak again sometime in the future, my friend.
I hope so too. Thank you so much.
Okay, and this wraps up episode 248 of the BoxHard Podcast. I've been your host, Joey Coastman. The former heavyweight world title challenger, Eddie Chambers, has been with me for the duration of the show. I hope you all enjoy his in-depth stories behind the scenes of some of his fights throughout his career. A huge shout out, of course, to our sole guest on this week's podcast, the former WBC Super-Featherweight world champion Jesse James Leija. It was a real pleasure to speak with him. I really enjoyed that interview. But most of all, thank you all for listening to this week's podcast. That goes out to our listeners. Boxing is slowly but steadily returning to our screens. Enjoy your weekends, people. Stay safe, and we shall see you all again next week.